Go ahead, Maria. Sorry. Go ahead, Chair Serpa.
No problem. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 25th, 2022 Enforcement and Compounding Committee meeting. My name is Maria Serpa, and I'm chairperson of this committee. Before we convene, I'd like to remind everyone present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing pharmacy law. Where protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. This meeting is being conducted consistent with the provisions of Government Code Section 11133. Participants watching the webcast will only be able to observe the meeting. Anyone interested in participating in the meeting must join the WebEx meeting. Information and instructions are posted on our website. As I facilitate this meeting, I will announce when we are accepting public comment. I have advised the meeting moderator to allot 3 minutes to each individual providing comments. This approach is necessary to facilitate this meeting and to assure the committee has an opportunity to complete its necessary business. Now I'd like to ask staff moderating the call to provide general instructions to the members of the public participating via WebEx. Moderator?
This is the moderator. When public comment is requested, a reference will be placed on the screen for you to check out. You can participate in public comment by pressing the question mark inside of a square, which is located at the right corner of your WebEx screen. And a text box will appear. You will type in comment or I would like to make a comment and send it to all panelists. And when prompted, you will click the unmute me button. You can also raise your hand by hovering your mouse over your name from the panelist list, and an outline of a hand will appear. Just click on that. If you are calling in, you can raise your hand by pressing *3, and we'll have the instructions on your screen each time public comment is requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to take a roll call to establish a quorum. Members, as I call your name, remember to open your line before speaking. Jig Patel. Thank you. Renee Barker. I'm hoping that she will have her audio connected soon and announce herself when she's able to hear or able to speak. Indira Cameron Banks.
Public member present.
Thank you. Sung Oh. Ricardo Sanchez. He's not able to make it today. A quorum has been established. Members, I would like to thank you for all of your time and commitment to the board and to California consumers. As I ask everyone participating today to be respectful of the work before the committee, we encourage participation by members of the public throughout the meeting at appropriate times. The committee respectfully requests that when comments are provided, they are done so in a professional manner consistent on how the board conducts its business. Now it's time for public comments. So I open the meeting for public comment for items not on the agenda. I'd like to remind members of the public that you are not required to identify yourself, but may do so. I'd also like to remind everyone that the committee cannot take action on these items except to decide whether to place them on a future agenda. Members, following public comment for this item, I will ask you for comments on what, if any, items should be placed on future agendas. As a reminder, this agenda item is not intended to be a discussion, but rather an opportunity for members of the committee and members of the public to request consideration for an item for future placement on an agenda. At that time, discussion may occur. Moderator, we're ready for public comment.
This is the moderator. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of square, type comment in the text field, and make sure you send that to all panelists. You can also raise your hand by hovering your mouse over next to your name and clicking on the hand outline. Those who are calling in only can raise their hand by pressing *3 from their phone. And I do have a few requests coming in. I'm going to set the timer here, 3 minutes. Give me just a moment. And an individual identified as Christopher Atkins, Farm D or Doctor. I will send a request to unmute your microphone.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Atkins. I'm a retail pharmacist. And my comment was 2 parts about Senate Bill 362 and Senate Bill 1442. In regards to the first, the quota law, I understand that there are some pending cases regarding this. And I was hoping as a retail pharmacist that with flu season essentially already here, that some decisions could be made on those cases rather soon. I know this is a very important and very stressful time for all the frontline pharmacists and pharmacy technicians, and it seems imperative that we establish some sort of precedent around this Senate bill as soon as possible so that the chains understand really what a quota is, because I believe some of them are still violating that law knowingly since there is no precedent and they feel like they can get around it in that way. My second comment is about Senate Bill 1442 regarding the staffing law that no pharmacist should be left behind. I just wanted to see if we could bring that on to a future discussion about the wording in it. It says that a pharmacist shouldn't be left behind and just has to have someone available to come help them. But a lot of the chains are kind of circumventing that by having people that are untrained or inadequately trained to be in the pharmacist and in the pharmacy, and essentially just have their name down on a piece of paper and believe that they're in line with the law in that way. So I was hoping that maybe we could get some more specific wording on that and maybe have someone specifically in the pharmacy or have some specific wording around what is considered someone that is able to come help in the pharmacy within that 5-minute time range. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next individual identified as Timothy Riffenburg. I will send a request to unmute your microphone. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name.
Committee. My name is Tim Riffenburg. I'm a full-time pharmacist at Savon Albertsons. I had been a manager for over 30 years and had stepped down out of the management position. But I've addressed the board on 3 other occasions regarding the violations of the companies with regard to SB 1442 and SB 362. This has been put on a future agenda. The companies just continue to ignore this. They just produce a phonied up list of names of people to comply, and what they believe is to satisfy the Board of Pharmacy. I work in like 20 different locations, and at least a half a dozen locations consistently never have anyone to help the last couple hours of the day, and the pharmacist works alone, or the first hour or 2 of the day. There's really been no honest effort on behalf of the companies to put people in place to assist the pharmacists that are trained. A lot of times the people that they have on these lists, they're not even HIPAA trained. They've never worked in the pharmacy. I call them on numerous occasions to see who's available and check the names, and no one ever comes. They ignore the pages to come assist the pharmacist. Probably half of the times that I review the list, the people names that are on the list, they're not even HIPAA trained, and they're not capable to come in and even help the pharmacist at a minimal level to like assist with the cash register or a phone call or anything. So the companies just continually ignore the policy because there is no enforcement and because it's profitable for them. I would like to see when we can actually get this moved into the enforcement committee so that there's a proactive measure. This has been, It's been 2 years since we passed this regulation, and the companies just ignore it, to be honest. And because, they can, and it's not profitable for them. So, I would be more than happy to assist in any way that I can with the board. And have, filed an affidavit, so, I would appreciate,
10 seconds.
I would appreciate, any feedback or response that you could provide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next individual is call-in user 8. I will send a request to unmute your microphone.
Jean Drexler, and I've been a retail pharmacist for 40 years, and I've been a strong advocate of State Bill 1442 from its start. Sadly, it's taken a long time for my company to finally pay any attention to it, and it's only because of COVID and all the added responsibilities that pharmacists are finally fed up with staffing conditions and filing complaints. But I think that the board needs to do a better job of making pharmacists aware of these laws and the regulations and all the legislation that's going on by providing continuing education to the pharmacy or to the pharmacists and about their rights under these bills. And it should not be the burden of the individual pharmacist to speak up and make the company comply with the law. It requires a lot of courage and energy that most pharmacists just don't have. And right now, State Bill 1442 is a regulation that's creating more work for the pharmacist because it requires so much documentation. I work alone over 50% of the time, and for me to document how many times I call and who I talk to, that's just more time, and I don't have that. And my store recently had a Board of Pharmacy audit, and the auditor did not even check my staffing log or for compliance. It should be part of every audit. And if the auditor finds noncompliance in one store, the whole company should be investigated and held accountable. It's not the individual pharmacy managers that have control over the staffing. And State Bill 1442 requires staffing, but there is a shortage of clerks and technicians. And I think that the companies and the unions and the organizations need to work with the high schools and the communities to implement programs to let students know that the community know that these jobs are available and create interest. Maybe there'll be a stepping stone to becoming a healthcare provider or a retail employee. And if the board needs any help with that, I would love to educate the public and the students. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the moderator. Next individual identified as Leanne Duong. I apologize, I mispronounced your name there. I sent a request to unmute your microphone.
California as well, and I wanted to echo many of the previous comments, particularly the one from Dr. Chris Atkins, who spoke first regarding the enforcement of Senate Bill 362. With the upcoming flu season, there's just great concern over setting a precedent early on and strong enough that the chains will begin to follow the new Senate bill. And secondly, regarding Senate Bill 1442, I agree with all the sentiment that has been made before me, and just wanted to echo that to really underscore the importance and the urgency of these situations. Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Andrew Zhang. I will send a request to mute your microphone.
Hi, yeah, my name is Andrew, and I'm a pharmacist working for Vons, the chain. And again, the people before have pretty much said what I wanted to say, but I'm a floater pharmacist in the Inland Empire area, so I go to all the different stores. And almost every store I've been to, I find myself working alone on the last 2 or 1 hour. And when I try to call for help, the front store does give me a list, but then the people are often either untrained, they're not even working that day, or they just simply say, "We're too busy, we can't help you." So that is an area of great concern to me because working alone is very dangerous for us pharmacists, both for our own licenses and also for patient safety. So I really just want to emphasize if the board can take greater notice to the SB 1442. And again, just like the others, the quotas is a great concern to me. I am getting emails about quotas almost on a daily basis. They want us to sell FlowFlex. They want us to sell 80 a day. They want us to give X amount of shingle shots, X amount of Tdap, Hep B, and then they just set these quotas. And what they do is they try to reword these quotas as challenges or goals. And then they try to justify it by saying, well, this isn't an individual goal, this is a store goal. But that is not really the point, because when the upper management calls, they ask, have you done that many? Not has the store done it. And then it just puts great pressure on us pharmacists, because we're here to serve the patients safely, and they want to treat us as used car salesmen. We have to chase people to get FlowFlexes. We have to chase people to get flu shots, chase people to get Tdap, pneumonia, and it just doesn't seem like this is the way it should go with the law passed. So I'm hoping that these two topics can be open for greater discussion, and that there's more widespread enforcement of these two policies, because without enforcement, these are just words on a piece of paper. They don't matter much. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Calling user 10, I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
And I'm a Ralph's pharmacist, PIC. I just want to express my gratitude for everything that everyone is doing, whether it's on the California Board of Pharmacy or as colleagues, the other pharmacists who are doing everything to protect the community. I have a concern that I want to address, and I've heard some of it. I apologize, I've logged in a little bit late. But in regards to the quotas as well, I have some concern because, as others have pointed out, we are meeting these quotas, and speaking to some lawyers, speaking to some others, the only way that we can file a complaint is if there's consequences for them. But no one necessarily wants to violate or go against their company. We all want to be here to do what we need to do to take care of our patients, but also as well as to be successful in our business. So I have some concerns in how are we supposed to run a successful business and stay alive to help patients if we don't have quotas, but also given that we don't want to have quotas, we're here to serve the best interests of the public. How do we file a complaint if there's no consequences? My other concern, slightly related to this, is I feel that more and more PICs are being pressured into a schedule where they don't have a proper oversight over their staff. For example, companies moving over to 12-hour shifts where the PIC will not really even have an overlap with their other staff members. And it feels like the company is shifting over the responsibility to oversee the staff and all things that may or may not go properly in the pharmacy over to the pharmacist. But it is not literally in my budget to be able to be there to oversee my staff. So I want to see if maybe there's something that we could start discussing and saying that, you know, the PIC needs to be able to oversee operations, and it can't be limited by a budget to some extent. Thanks again for allowing me to speak. And again, my gratitude to everyone, and I wish everyone safety in the coming months as we vaccinate and help the community.
Thank you.
Individual who submitted a comment, give you the opportunity to unmute your microphone if you wish to do so. Max O, you in the attendees attendees list and send a request.
Schedule permits, would you mind promoting Renee Barker, please?
Yes.
As well as Jig. I think Jig is on the attendees.
And Max, oh, I apologize. You have been unmuted.
Oh, sure. I was just going to mention that, all these issues that are coming up, I feel like sometimes the underlying cause is just, at the end of the day, a lot of retail pharmacy is a business model. And over the years, the PBMs have gone, completely unregulated when it comes to, pharmacy reimbursement. And there's a cost to filling prescriptions when it comes to patient care, making sure that your inventory is up to date, you're following regulations, you're taking the time to counsel patients. And these days, reimbursements can be literally just pennies, like 30 cents to fill a prescription. Doesn't cover the cost of the bottle or the label. And then, then the companies just start cutting and cutting to the point where it's unsafe. And I think something needs to be done to oversee this, because as part of any business, healthcare is a business, there has to be the money to do things that are safe for the public and run the the pharmacy in a way that is safe for patients. Thank you.
This is the moderator. No further requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, we heard significant comment on two legislative activities, which was SB 362 and 1442. Just wanted to let you know this is on the radar of this committee, and that staff do provide us periodic updates on their enforcement and education activities. And for background material, I would ask you, especially the new members, to read the current issue of the script, which reviews the background information on those two legislative activities. With that said, board members, do you have any comments or any suggestions on including any of these items on a future agenda, other than what I just said? Sung, I see your hand up.
Hi, Maria and Chair Serpa. I just want to state for the record, I do think the board takes this issue very seriously. We're not just sitting idly. We are very serious in terms of these laws, and I just applaud all of those folks for coming and speaking up. I hope all of you keep speaking up, and thank you for coming to the meeting.
Any other board member comments? And I'm sorry, I can't see everyone's hand, and so if I don't see you, just go ahead and speak up. I only see a few people on my screen. Okay. Before we move on to the next item, agenda item, I wanted to confirm our attendees. Dr. Barker, are you present and able to hear us and speak?
Sorry for the delay. Thank you. Yes.
No problem.
Welcome to your first meeting, Renee.
Thank you.
This is her second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And Jig, I think you had an issue where you fell off, and are you back on and able to hear us and speak?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moderator, did you have any questions or concerns about access by the board members, or can we move on? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3 is approval of the July 19th, 2022 committee meeting minutes. Included in attachment 1 of the meeting materials are the draft minutes for this meeting. Members, as we begin, do you have any questions or comments on the draft minutes? And as a part of your comments, I would also entertain a motion if you believe such an action is appropriate.
Hi, Chair Serpa. I can make motion to approve the minutes for our July 19th, 2022 meeting. No comments.
Thank you. We have a motion by Dr. O. Is there a second? Or any other comments?
Morning, this is Jig. I'll second it.
Thank you, Jig. With a motion and second on the floor, I now open the discussion for public comments. Moderator, we're ready for public comment.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of a square, type comment, and send it to all panelists. You can also raise your hand by hovering your mouse over your name and clicking on the hand outline, or if you're calling in, you can press *3 to raise your virtual hand. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Thank you. Please. With a motion and second and public comment received, I now will take a roll call. Jig Patel,
Yes.
Renee Barker.
Present.
Voting on the minutes, Renee, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Indira Cameron Banks. Sung Oh. And the chair votes yes, motion passes. Thank you. Item number 4, discussion and consideration of regulation of surgical clinics pursuant to Business and Professions Code 4190. Members, relevant sections of pharmacy law are detailed in the meeting materials, including the requirements covering the regulations of surgical clinics, which are defined in BMP Code 4190. As specified in this section, surgical clinic is licensed by the board. A surgical clinic that is licensed by the board may purchase drugs at wholesale for administration from a commingled drug supply to patients registered for the care at that clinic. Further law specifies in BMP Code 4192 that the surgical clinic is required to retain a consultant pharmacist to jointly approve policies and procedures used by the surgical clinic. Further, the consulting pharmacist is required to visit the clinic regularly and at least quarterly to review operations and to certify in writing if the clinic is operating in compliance with legal requirements. The written certification shall be kept in file at the clinic for 3 years and shall include recommended corrective actions if appropriate. As you may recall, earlier this year, as a part of public comment received during the April 2022 board meeting, a commenter suggested that surgical clinics are not being inspected on a quarterly basis as required. The commenter suggested that the board perform education on this requirement. The issue was referred to this committee for discussion, and that's why it's on the agenda today. The commenter did suggest a solution, which was education. However, it appears appropriate to also expand our consideration to the policy behind the legal requirements to determine if additional action may be appropriate. So today, to aid with our discussion, the meeting materials include several policy questions. The questions will also be displayed on the screen. You see the first one there already, to help us from a process standpoint. So I suggest that we discuss the questions as a committee, and then following all the member discussions on the questions, we open up for public comment all at once. Okay? So the first question, as you see, is on the screen. Does the committee wish to provide guidance to staff on the development of educational materials, such as development of a newsletter article? Members? I'm a strong supporter of education. I think a newsletter article would be appropriate. But I also think it's appropriate that we send reminders via subscriber alerts and any other ways that we can get information out to the surgical clinics so that they are aware of the requirements. Members, do you have any comments on question number 1?
I raised my hand, Maria, but you may not.
I'm sorry, I can't see everybody, so please do speak up if I don't acknowledge you.
I will.
Thank you, Sung.
Just a question for our staff. I was just curious, and if you don't have the information, totally okay. I'm just curious, do they actually get inspected by board inspectors? Have they been inspected routinely?
That's coming up in the further questions.
Oh, is it? Okay. So for this question, then I would say education is always good. So absolutely.
This is Renee Barker. I would also agree. I think probably raising awareness of the requirement for this whole process would be a good start.
Thank you. Okay, if everyone's ready, we can move on to number 2. The font got a lot smaller there, so I hope you can all see that. Now let's look more specifically at the policy, kind of going to what Sung's comments were about. A consulting pharmacist is required to certify in writing if the clinic is operating in compliance. The clinic is required to maintain these reports. However, there is no mechanism to confirm that a consulting pharmacist has been retained and is completing the quarterly reports. What mechanism do you feel may be appropriate to confirm compliance with this provision? Also, should verification of compliance perhaps be included in the annual renewal process as a suggested mechanism too? So we're looking at compliance, and it is very difficult because we don't have a mechanism. And so perhaps using the annual renewal process may be of help to us. And that's because the surgical clinics are already interacting with the board annually. And so there is a communication event that happens at least annually. Members, what do you think?
So Maria, this is Song. Just to confirm that they're not, then I'm guessing the answer to my question is they're not inspected by us. This is like a voluntary system?
They are inspected for complaints, and they are part of the inspection process that happens routinely. But as I come further down, we'll talk about how often that happens. Very few are inspected annually. Our primary communication with the clinics is during the renewal process, which is all done in writing and not on site.
Well, I get a little nervous about, the licensed entities that we technically have jurisdiction in some fashion, but not maybe fully. But I still feel strongly that they all have to be in compliance with the laws. So I would support the efforts to have some sort of verification of compliance in annual renewals if it's done annually. So I would be supportive of that effort.
And again, I can't see everybody, so if there's a pause and I don't call on you, please do speak up if you wanted to make a comment. Okay, number 3. This is kind of walking us through this process. The law is silent as to what action must be taken by a surgical clinic when the issue of noncompliance is identified. When noncompliance is identified, do we as a committee believe that the development of a law or regulation to report noncompliance is appropriate? This is a really interesting question because I went back and I reviewed the presentation that we received at our last meeting where the board inspection program was reviewed. And we are routinely, this is going back to Sung's comments too, we are routinely inspecting clinics, but it does not appear that we have reviewed many per year, and it may be a resource issue as we reflect on the board's direction to focus performing inspections at pharmacies. So that's one of the things that we as a committee are monitoring, that our pharmacies and licensed entities being reviewed and how many of them have not been reviewed in many years. So the idea of reporting noncompliance could be a way for us to identify those surgical clinics that are out of compliance and may be able to identify them as requiring an inspection more quickly. So what do you think about having a law or regulation that would require reporting noncompliance rather than it just be known by the entity itself?
So I'm a little confused. So if the non-compliance is identified, do we have, what actions can we take? I guess it's my question.
Well, at this time, they don't have to report it to anyone. So unless they have an inspection, it may go unknown for quite some time. And so there's an opportunity to create a regulation or perhaps a law, depending on what is required, to make it a reportable event, so that clinic would have to report to the board when they're not in compliance, if they miss if they don't have a pharmacist, or if they miss a required documentation of their review.
I mean, I think that we're discussing this off of one commenter, so can we get some confirmation? I don't know if there's a way to get some confirmation of data to actually reflect that there is a more widespread issue of non-compliance before we take any action. I would hope that the staff can work on something to try to figure out where that is, or if that is already figured out for today's meeting preparation, that would be great as well. But I don't want us to go down the path of regulation yet, but that's just me, until like we can confirm that there is some sort of an issue, or I guess one step at a time is how I feel, but I'm open for discussion.
You know, you bring up a good point, because right now we don't know, because they're not required to tell us. And so perhaps the method may be, you know, using that annual renewal process to identify the scope of this. That's a good comment. But you know, this is just taking it a step further. So that's why it's broken up into sections. I do see a hand. I see Renee's hand.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, my comment was pretty much reflects what you just said, Maria, which is kind of going back to number 2, where, you know, perhaps including the reports from not including the reports, but including, you know, the documentation that there has been a consulting pharmacist on the required regular basis in their annual documentation that they submit. And then at that point, you know, almost like in a self-assessment, they can say whether they've met the requirement or not. But there could be possibly some way that they could, I'm not sure, like a way to notify the board if they're waiting for someone to come inspect, but it seems like that would be more an internal process, where they would be contacting the consultant pharmacist to find out when they're coming, that type of thing.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, I'll just curiosity, and how many clinics are licensed in the state of California? I should know this, so I'm sure I can just look up too, but since Anne is always a wealth of knowledge and resource, so I'm always put her on the spot. Anyway, we don't have to answer now, but just for curiosity.
If you give me a few minutes, I'm happy to pull up some data from the board packet.
Yeah, I think that information is in the meeting materials, but we can find it real quick. The last question is, and I really have to thank the board members for kind of thinking along with me, because you're prompting my questions. And so it's very good that Dr. O and Dr. Barker are asking these questions, because the next question has to be about, we currently don't have a process that details out the specific elements of a consulting pharmacist report. What should be in that report and what should be looked at? Do we believe it's appropriate that we have a standard reporting template? Perhaps a self-assessment, which is our standard template that we use for other licensees, that potentially could be used by the consultant pharmacist in developing their quarterly report. So again, I find this very interesting, and it kind of came up during our previous discussion on the previous questions. Developing tools is always helpful. Our licensees do like to have tools, and perhaps the mechanism of a self-assessment could be one such tool that could be used. We have not developed anything like this for surgical clinics, so I believe that the concept may be helpful to them, and it may also help us to identify, as Sung pointed out, where non-compliance is identified, and to assure that they do have action planning steps to achieve compliance. This appears to be consistent with the policy of what a consultant pharmacist is required to do, and to assure that they have something in writing and have some corrective actions in mind. So members, do you believe that a standardized report, maybe a self-assessment, something like that, would be beneficial in this situation?
I think quarterly reporting, having a self-assessment process and hopefully a template would be ideal.
Thank you,
And
Jay.
part of it could be that reporting any of the non-compliance. And the board will get that every quarter, so.
Well, the timing would be still to be determined, but that we would get it at some periodic interval.
Correct, exactly, yeah. Quarterly or once a year.
Members, any other comments about some sort of tool?
My only concern is self-assessment. We're now going every 2 years. We're trying to be very consistent with that. So are we making a self-assessment that is more like non-enforceable kind of a document? Is that what we're thinking? Or are we requiring them to do every 2 years, just like every other self-assessment where we have on the books? Like, that's kind of my question. I'm not questioning the self-assessment. I think it would be very helpful, but just kind of the logistics of self-assessment, because it's better to keep things consistent as much as possible.
That's a good point. I think that would be something that that's why we're discussing kind of developing some sort of policy statement, because it sounds like we're looking at some sort of periodic report and trying to use the renewal process as a mechanism, and whether that, how that happens. I think that those are things to consider, whether it's actually like turning in the self-assessment or maybe just signing off that they have a consultant pharmacist and that they are doing periodic reviews. And, I think we have several options that we could ask staff to look at. That's a good point, Sung. Consistency is important because we already have way too many, I shouldn't say too many. We have a lot of laws and regulations that pharmacists can easily get confounded.
Maria.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Renee. I just wanted to make a comment. So it looks like, so they renew on an annual basis. That was in number 2.
Yes.
Is that correct? So, I mean, we could be talking about sort of 2 different opportunities here. One, simply a way of saying that during that annual period that they have met the requirement of the quarterly visit by a consulting pharmacist and are passing without issue, according to the pharmacist, something like that, just so that can be a trigger point. And then the self-assessment would have more details, maybe for like the quality assessment of the pharmacist and the timing, and basically incorporate the regulations into that self-assessment.
So I think that those are really good points. So just to kind of clarify, because at the end we're going to give some staff some direction to come back to us with some details. It sounds like everyone is fairly much on board with some sort of acknowledgement that they have a pharmacist, that the surgical clinic has a pharmacist consultant, and that they're doing the reporting. So the acknowledgement is important. The how that acknowledgement is documented is kind of what we're discussing, and would be interested in discussing more. Does that sound right?
That sounds like a good direction.
Any other comments? Because the next question is kind of taking a little right turn, which is a good turn, but number 5. As you know, our committee spends a lot of time on compounding. So the question came up about what are the types of services that are provided in a surgical clinic? It's possible that they're doing sterile compounding in this environment also. Should our self-assessment form include some sort of data collection about what are their sterile compounding practices? I find this very interesting, as I stated, because we talk about sterile compounding practices a lot. I mean, that's part of one of the important issues of our committee. And so this may be an opportunity for us to gather more information on sterile compounding practices that happen in our licensed locations that aren't LSCs. So I'm in favor of some sort of data collection to see, who's doing sterile compounding and what are their processes. But I'm curious to see what the members think.
Go ahead, Renee.
Maria, I would agree with you that possibly some data collection about what types of sterile compounding practices are happening in the areas. I mean, I know in, OR areas, they have their sterile areas and there's some different processes, but I think in terms of, what types of aseptic technique or training or safeguarding of sterile products, beyond use states they're giving to open containers and things like that. All those things that are reviewed by Board of Pharmacy inspectors, just some kind of guidelines to know that they're following those types of regulations. So possibly, in the self-assessment would be a place to more detail those questions.
Dr. O?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, yes, I would definitely be interested in data collection, but this is where I don't want to get off tangent, but that concern of like our licensee doing activities at certain license types and all that stuff. But it would be interesting to see what's going on at these clinics in terms of sterile compounding, just in terms of data collection for now.
Great, thank you. You're not seeing any other hands. Have I missed anybody? We've had a very interesting discussion on a rather new topic for us. And so before we move on with some direction, I'd be interested in seeing what members of the public think about our discussion and if they have any other comments regarding surgical clinics and the things that we have talked about today. So I think we're ready for public comment.
Instructions are on the screen for your reference. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of a square, which is typically located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And in the text field that appears, type in comment and make sure you send that to all panelists. And when prompted, click the Unmute Me button. You can also raise your hand by hovering your mouse or your cursor over your name if you have the panelist list open, and clicking on the outline of a hand. If you are calling in, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 from your phone. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Please do, thank you.
Thank you.
Members, thank you very much for this very interesting discussion on a new topic for us. I think we have a little bit of direction, but I did want to ask the staff, do you have sufficient information and guidance from the committee to develop a proposal that we can consider in the future for more detailed discussion? Anne or staff?
I think we have some basic tenets kind of broken out, some concepts. If members are comfortable, we'll work with Maria offline as the chair of the committee on some different touch points. And then if we have additional questions, bring those back at a future meeting.
Great, thank you. I look forward to the future discussions. Okay. Agenda item 5, discussion and consideration of barriers to timely case resolutions. Unfortunately, this item will need to be deferred to a future meeting. We won't be discussing this item today. Move on to item number 6, discussion and consideration of potential draft regulations, including a self-assessment form related to outsourcing facilities. This should be another interesting discussion. In responses to the changing law in January of this year, the board released FAQs providing guidance to outsourcing facilities that intend to dispense patient-specific prescriptions in California. So if you remember back, and some of the newer members may not have the historical perspective, so hopefully I can review a little bit more about that, and if you have any questions, please do ask. At the end of the FAQs is a link to the board's pharmacy self-assessment form, which is the general pharmacy self-assessment form that was provided as a tool for outsourcers to use to aid them in understanding the relevant provisions of pharmacy law related to dispensing medications that are required to dispensing patient-specific medications. So again, it was a self-assessment that is currently about dispensing prescriptions in pharmacies, not specific to outsourcing pharmacies. We felt that the outsourcing pharmacies needed additional information on what California requires for patient-specific information. The FAQs provided a means to release necessary information quickly and efficiently to the outsourcing facilities. We continue to implement this program, and staff are recommending that we consider building on the FAQs and provide more regulatory guidance to outsourcing facilities through the development of regulation language. Based on my understanding of BMP Code 4129, the legislator contemplated that we would be developing regulations and explicitly authorized the adoption of regulations in this section. Included in the meeting materials, staff are suggesting the development of regulations as well as a potential outsourcing specific self-assessment form to aid licensees with compliance. In a previous agenda discussion, the board, just previously we just talked about it, the board uses self-assessment forms for several of its license types as a means to facilitate compliance through self-evaluation. So hopefully you've had a chance to read attachment 2. It includes the concept, regulation language, and conceptual self-assessment form to demonstrate how staff believe this policy goal could be implemented. So just to be clear, I wanted to highlight that this is just a concept at this point for us to start some discussions. If after discussion we believe that this is appropriate, staff will continue to work to develop a more robust proposal for our future consideration with more discussion. So these are just some concept points, and having something to review helps us to be a little bit more focused and not necessarily have an unfocused discussion today. So I am comfortable working with staff to provide this direction to them after our meeting today. And if you're comfortable with if you're comfortable with such an approach, I believe that this is consistent on how we've done work in past committee meetings. So looking at the policy proposal, in general terms, I am comfortable and think it does warrant some additional development and discussion by staff before we discuss the details as a committee. This would be at a future meeting. So again, just looking at some ways of providing some education to licensees, probably using some sort of self-assessment form to help in the role of education. And it gives them an opportunity to provide a meaningful assessment to their operations. So members, I hope you had a chance to look at that. Do you have any comments on the concept?
Just one comment I have. I really commend the effort and the staff for coming up with this. This is a lot of work. Again, I think that we're, always it looks like we're adding more stuff. Just a thought is there seems to be only about 21 outsourcing facilities in the entire country. I mean, this is a lot of work for the staff, and granted, yes, we should probably provide guidance, but is there any way, like with such a low number of licensed population, like we can try to figure out if all this effort is even worthwhile? I mean, obviously it's hard to say, but like, can we try to figure out, are you planning on providing patient-specific prescriptions hello, outsourcing facility. I mean, obviously it sounds a little, maybe not possible to do that direction, but just seems like this is so much work and requirement. I'm not saying that we can't take on, but just for such a small subset of population, this seems like a daunting task for staff. And I'm sure Anne can take care of it and she'll figure it out a way to make it work. But I just want to make sure that this is worth all the resource that we'll be putting into developing this, and that it's worthwhile effort for us.
Thank you for those comments. I think that one of the things that maybe Anne can touch on a little bit more, but just in background, is while the number of licensees may seem to be small, it's very high risk and very problem prone. We're finding that there is a lack of understanding, and while we thought that the FAQs would be sufficient, we're finding that they're not sufficient, and that legally we will probably need to promulgate some sort of regulations to support the continued educational needs, and having some sort of self-assessment would be helpful, but we can't come up with a self-assessment if we don't have regulation too. So trying to close the gap on the FAQs didn't quite hit the mark as what we would have expected, and needing to provide more information. We're kind of stuck with not having specific regulations that call this out, even though the law give us the authority to provide these information. The recommendations that we're getting is that we need additional regulations to provide a self-assessment. So I probably did not explain that extremely well, but maybe Anne could also speak to why we think this is important to move forward.
Actually, Chair Serp, I think you did a great job. I think as we're looking at, implementation and some of the efforts that we've already undertaken, it appears that it's appropriate to provide additional guidance to licensees with respect to outsourcing, as well as just outsourcing at large, as well as those that are doing the patient specific. So patient specific was maybe part of the triggering event, but then a deeper dive into this in consultation with council and everything, it was kind of recommended that maybe we consider promulgating some regulation in this area.
Mm-hmm. And if you remember, we received significant public comment about how the outsourcers were confused about patient-specific prescriptions. And that's why we did the FAQs, to try to solve that issue, and it didn't completely solve it.
So I guess my bigger question is, there is general interest from the outsourcers to do patient-specific prescriptions. That's kind of, I just want to confirm that part. Because that seems to me is a little bit of like their business model that I have an understanding of is just more like they're really a very well regulated kind of manufacturer almost. But so there is an interest that you guys heard of, that they are interested in providing patient-specific prescriptions.
I think it comes up with a lot of the compounding things that we talked about, in sterile compounding and some of those customized specific products. So it does come up in that arena. And that's what makes it problem prone, is because it is not a large volume. And so I think they're finding difficulty in figuring out, what does California really want? And the FAQs were the first attempt to give them the information. This is what California wants to protect its citizens. But there's appears to be more need. But Anne maybe could speak specifically to that specific question, because I'm not sure if we actually have numbers or volume, but we do know that it is not extreme large numbers, but problem prone.
So I don't have data specifically, but when AB 1533 passed, the board did receive public comment asking for additional guidance on how to perform the patient-specific. I do think that there are other types of, or there are certain types of outsourcing that perhaps, I'm going to speak in general terms, but perhaps the compounded preparation is being sent under the outsourcing, it's for an identified patient, but not being labeled as such. So this may provide a more clearer path to compliance in some of those instances.
Okie dokie, thank you. And for me, I think that in that case, we could definitely proceed with this path. It seems like there is a need. So, sorry, Anne, one more thing for you to do, but.
Thank you. Any other board comment?
Hi, hi Maria. This is Renee. Yeah, I would support continuing to pursue this idea of a self-assessment form, something for the outsourced facilities to have some type of review of their processes for direct to consumer products that they are providing, so that they meet some of the requirements that are established for, patients receiving medications. So I would definitely be in support of, pursuing this process.
Thank you.
I'm in support of it as well.
Thank you, Jed. Again, I can't see everybody, but if you have your hand up or want to speak, just speak up before we move on. Okay, I think we're ready for public comment. Moderator?
This is the moderator. Members of the public, the Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click on that question mark inside of a square, typically located bottom right corner of your WebEx screen, and type comment in the text field. Make sure you send that to all panelists. If you prefer, you can raise your hand by hovering your mouse or cursor over your name, and a outline of a hand will appear. Click on that. If you are calling in, you can raise your virtual hand by pressing *3 from your phone. I do have a request. I'm going to set my timer here. I'm Christopher Atkins. I will send a request to unmute your microphone.
I do think the self-assessment that I'm looking at is a good idea for the outsourcing facilities. I think especially as it becomes more commonplace. I know with the, I guess they'd be called the online prescribers, or like where you can go online and get prescriptions basically sent in from another state to your home. I know we have very specific laws in California, so I think having self-assessments for those outsourcing facilities would be very useful, especially I saw one part in there about the good faith examinations. I know there has been some issues with some of the, I believe it was Cerebral was one of the online companies that was providing prescriptions for anxiety medications and Adderall, things like that. So I think there might have been an issue with them having good faith examinations. So I think having some sort of a self-assessment for the outsourcing facility specific to our laws in California would be very helpful for that.
Thank you.
As the moderator, no further requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Thank you, yes. So members, once again, thank you for interesting discussion on a newer topic. If you're agreeable, I will work with staff on refinement of the proposal, and during our next meeting, we can discuss the proposal more in depth and the underlying policy. Members, are you agreeable?
Just in case, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Good. So look forward to this concept coming back. Agenda item 7, discussion and consideration of proposed changes to the board's citation and fine authority related to unlicensed activity. The meeting materials detail out some of the general provisions for the board's citation and fine program. For the purposes of discussion today, we'll focus specifically on citations issued for unlicensed activity. The large policy question for us today is consideration of the board's current fine authority related to unlicensed activity to determine if we should offer recommendations for change. As the materials indicate, the board issued 72 citations for unlicensed activities last year. That's just appalling, isn't it? Although citations and fines are not posted on the board's website, they are public information. Over the past years, as the board's vice president, I've had the opportunity along with the president, to review the closed citations. At times, I've noted that an entity may have provided pharmacy services in an unlicensed capacity, including the dispensing of prescriptions into California without a license. When an investigation reveals such activity, generally the maximum fine the board can issue that entity is $5,000. I'm not confident that's a sufficient response in some instances. Members, I'd like to open this up for discussion. This is another newer policy type of discussion. As I do so, I'd like to highlight that although not included in the meeting materials, BMP Code 4126.5C provides authority for the board to issue citation for violations of the section for each occurrence, as opposed to each investigation. That's something that we should talk about. This section of the law was not included in the meeting materials, but I request that the staff include a slide for your general information. So there's the slide with what I just read.
Hi, Maria. Song. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just a few more words here to kind of kick this off. The section of the law generally describes who a pharmacy may furnish dangerous drugs to, and provides non-compliance with the provision, provides for an assessment of a fine for each occurrence rather than each investigation. From a policy standpoint, this approach for unlicensed entities may provide some parity and some potential outcomes for those pharmacies that continue to provide medications to citizens of our state not being licensed. So it's not all citations that warrant a fine exceeding $5,000, but there are some really egregious cases where we see that the entity provides a significant number or knows that they're falling outside of the law for California, but see that the risk is low or the fine is so low that it's worth the financial gain. So board members, what do you think?
Hi, Maria. This is Song. So just to understand that, I don't think 5,000 is sufficient to address unlicensed activity. If we agree on that, what actions do we need to take to change that? Would it require legislative change for this kind of a thing because of the BPC 125.9? Or would there be some other avenue of changing this within our own? I'm guessing I'm just a process point of question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, not like trying to jump the gun.
No, that's actually a really good question. And I think that's why we had this additional slide in here. Maybe Anne or Eileen could discuss that question and what's posted here on the slide. And does this give us the authority to have this discussion?
So the slide was provided, the information was provided to show that pharmacy law already has a process in place where it recognizes that a fine in certain circumstances may be based on the assessment based on a per occurrence versus a per investigation model that we think of most routinely. So I think this was trying to kind of demonstrate that there's already precedent for such an approach in pharmacy law. Specific to implementation, I do believe that it would require statutory change. We've seen statutory change with, citation and fine authority over the years. Most recently, last year, as part of the board sunset bill, where there were new provisions or new citation and fine authority established through statute. So I do believe this would require a legislative change.
Go ahead, Jake, sorry.
No, it's okay. So I just had a question. So let's say a non-licensed entity has 15 violations, different occurrence, and can they be charged $75,000?
Well, again, I think it would depend on the situation. So, Anne, do you have a kind of a more global answer?
I think Jig, at this point, I can't say because it's going to depend on the policy that you all decide to discuss. If you like this per occurrence model, I didn't do the math in my head. So if you believe that this per occurrence is the appropriate outcome, then yes, I believe that would be it. But again, I want to highlight that there are ranges within cite and fines. So we don't have a regulation that says if this, then this. You have the authority to do something up to a certain amount. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that in every case it would result in $5,000 per invoice or occurrence, whatever it is. But you would have the ability to do that if it was appropriate.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
So for the record, I think I would be actually strongly supporting the policy direction that it shall be occurrences. I'm deeply concerned about out-of-state wholesalers who may not be licensed, or out-of-state pharmacy entities, or may not be a pharmacy, whoever they may be, shipping prescriptions into California. So I think we need to be very tough. Just my opinion, though. That's I'm open for board members' thoughts on it.
I'll just add, also kind of seconding what Song said, is, a very big concern for who these unlicensed entities are. If they're, good pharmacies who are seemingly unknowing that they're supposed to be licensed, or if they're just advertising, globally and shipping wherever it lands, then I think that's a real danger to anybody receiving them, but especially any consumer in California. So I think it's definitely a concern. And then, just out of curiosity, I mean, I don't think this is why somebody wouldn't be unlicensed, but what is the licensing cost if they were to get licensed before they were working into California? Just even approximate.
Anne, I think you probably have access to the cost of a license.
While Anne looks that up, I just want to also add, I don't know if this is relevant, but I would like to note that the proliferation of online businesses the last 2 years, albeit a lot of them legitimate and really important businesses to take care of patients and consumers, there's been some concerns that I've seen personally that I would be, a little scared that there's so much online, whatever that may be. So I think that California should take a strong stand in ensuring that pharmacy prescriptions that our state population receives are legitimate and are sourced appropriately. So just want to add that there.
A pharmacy application is currently $570.
Okay, so certainly the cost is not a barrier for somebody to do business for a prescription. Didn't think it was. I don't think that's the motivation or a barrier of any kind. So anyway, I was just kind of curious how close that came, but that's obviously not as much, not too much. So, and then I think just the concern, I mean, certainly a lot of us see what the FDA finds, those adulterated non-prescription products made by various, some say they're pharmacies, but it's just a concern about the quality of those products.
Any other member comment? Let's go to public comment, moderator.
The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of a square typically located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type comment in the text field and send it to all panelists. You can also raise your hand by hovering your cursor over your name and clicking on the outline of a hand that appears. For those calling in, you can press *3 to raise your hand virtually. I do have an individual identified as Jassy Gruwal. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. I am going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, this is Jassy Graywall with UFCW Western States Council. Appreciate the opportunity to provide public comment this morning. I just want to echo some of the comments that the board members have previously stated, that in order to ensure and deter bad behavior by non-licensed actors, we really need to make sure penalties are something that deters that behavior. Having very low or minimal penalties does not deter or scare these non-licensed actors from entering the marketplace and operating illicit operations. And so just really urge this board to consider what is a penalty that would deter that behavior from the onset, or if a facility is to get caught with unlicensed activities, and make sure that they don't want to re-engage in that marketplace afterwards. Thank you.
This is the moderator. No further requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Please do, thank you. And Jassy and all, I apologize for the alarm that went off. There's a Sacramento County emergency test system, so all the alarms just went off. I apologize for that. It's just a test. Please stand by, right? Is that what they normally say? Thank you, members and Jassy and members of the public, for your comments and your discussion. If you're agreeable, I will work with staff on refining the proposal and bring this to our next meeting for further discussion and developing of a policy. Members, are you agreeable?
Yes.
Thank you. Good, thank you.
Yes.
Moving on, we are doing so well. Item number 8, future committee meeting dates. Before we adjourn today, I'd like to highlight that we will be canceling the October 19th meeting in anticipation of USP releasing its finalized, revised compounding chapters. I had added additional dates for us to discuss sterile compounding and compounding activities. But at this time, it appears that the final publication has not occurred, and that our October 19th date is not going to be necessary. We'll continue to monitor updates from the USP and keep you all apprised of potential impacts to our meeting schedule. Members, adjournment. Thank you very much for your time today. It was a very quick meeting, and I do appreciate all your comments, especially on our new topics. I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion on them. And I will see some of you at this afternoon's Standards of Care meeting.
And at the full board meeting too. See you guys.
That's true. Full board meeting in the late afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.